Good news for the Texans, and the bad news ain't so bad because it features and kind of magnifies the strength of the team. Plus, one of the most underrated aspects of this team, Bobby Slowik, he speaks on the topic you want to know about, and Brandon Scott joins the show. We got a lot to talk about as Week 12 is upon us, live in the locker room.
Yeah. It's the locker room on YouTube. You know what it is. Let's get it. Hey, locker room. Yeah, we in the locker room. Texas talk. Yeah, you know what we about to do. Localize. Every angle's what we really do. We the source. We the post.
All right, it is locker room, number one source for Texans digital content. I am Landry Locker. You can see me here throughout the day, morning, 9 a.m. on SNL. Subscribe on all podcast platforms in that as well if you want the audio version of that. Also, nightly, 10:30, talking all things Texans. Let's start this thing with a little bit of a practice update, if you will. We're going to be joined by Brandon Scott in a second, but the practice update, there's some good news for this ball club. They are very, very healthy right now. The Texans are very, very healthy right now. The only guys right now that are missing that we don't already know aren't going to be playing outside of Christian Harris. Foley Fatukasi did not practice, and neither did Danico Autry. And for me, this kind of showcases what I think has become the strength of this team. And when I say strength of this team, I mean it's not dependent on one guy. Obviously, CJ Stroud is your most important guy. He's a quarterback. But this defensive line, it doesn't matter who does and doesn't play. This defensive line is going to produce. Whether Mario Edwards is suspended, whether Will Anderson is or isn't playing, whether Danico Autry is suspended, whether Fatukasi's banged up, the defensive line is going to produce. So if you are without Fatukasi and you are without Danico Autry, I think you feel good. You actually feel good even if you're without Will Anderson. And I think that's the good thing about this team. And that's what this team is going to probably hang their hat on whenever it becomes crunch time and the playoffs come around or late in the season and defense kind of travels. I think that's the good news of that. I'm going to bring in Brandon Scott in a sec, but first I want to kind of revisit an interaction that I had earlier on Twitter with Chancellor Johnson, KPRC2. Shout out to him. Texans Pep Talk with him and DJ BNMA, a very, very underrated weekly thing that I think all Texans fans should consume. So shout out to Chancellor and what he's doing. But I had a back and forth with him when reacting to the injury report. And this was what the interaction was. I said, this team is pretty healthy at the moment at the right time. Chancellor replied and said, good for the Texans, but I'd argue the right time would be the 3 games in 10-day stretch. I simply said, I feel you, but the Texans can wrap up the division before that stretch with seeding likely pretty clear. I said the magic number is 4, I believe, which would mean that 10-day stretch won't matter as much. And you can be cautious with guys and have them ready when it matters. He said magic number is talk is crazy before Thanksgiving or for any team is insane, but even crazier when it involves the Texans. This is why I disagree with what Chancellor is saying, because I actually think when the number is 4, it kind of speaks for itself. You're facing the 2 worst teams in the NFL the next 2 weeks. You're facing the Tennessee Titans, who do pose a little bit of a challenge, and B. Scott has an interesting theory on that. But you're also facing the Jacksonville Jaguars, 2 teams that you should beat. During that stretch before the bye, the Colts are going to face the best team in football, the Detroit Lions, which something weird's going on with that line, and then they're going to face the Patriots. So any combination of four Texans wins and Colts losses, and the Texans win the division. Have you ever, like in college? I was in college for a long time, much longer than most people probably that aren't doctors would have been in college. You ever have a college course where if you do your work up to the end, you don't have to take the final? And that means you can just kind of chill and you don't have to force yourself. Like that doomsday stretch that the Texans have, where they have the Dolphins, then they have the Chiefs, and then they have the Ravens on Wednesday. That can turn into a time to get healthy for the playoffs if you just take care of business right now. And that's why I don't think it is too early to count down the magic number 4. It's not a lot. It's not a lot of games to count down. And I think if you can minimize that stretch to where if Will Anderson's ankle is hurting a little bit, you can rest him and have him ready for the playoffs. Or if Nico Collins' hamstring is tight, rather than having to gut it out and go win a division, you can get healthy at the right time. So I actually think this time, these 2 games are just as important as the Baltimore and Kansas City game. I don't think it's too early to look at that. Do I think that winning division titles is the only goal? I do not. But I do think that because of the Southern hospitality that the Texans have, if you are able to win the division, take care of business, and minimize that murderer's row that everybody seems to talk about, I think that's a hell of a thing. And that's why I think they are healthy at the right time. Let's bring in the great Brandon Scott of the Chronicle and Sports Radio 610. B. Scott, what do you make of the theory of already counting down the magic number for the division so that brutal December stretch kind of minimized a little bit, and you can kind of play it a little safe if you so choose?
Yeah, bro, it is a matter of math. Like 4 is 4. You know what I mean? Like I hate to sound to oversimplify or sound simplistic with that, but 4, if the magic number is 4, then it's 4 today, and that's the number. Like I don't get. Maybe it's too early to want to think in those terms,
right?
But I do think that what you're saying is just like mathematically hard to argue against. And then I think Chance, and I will defend a little bit, I think Chance's point is also that you just want to be healthiest and playing at your best at the end of the season.
No doubt.
And if you stick with that logic, then yeah, no, I'm not going to argue with that either. But yeah, you're and I think the comparison that you make to college, I was also in college for a really long time, longer than I was supposed to be, longer than my parents wanted to pay. But we do know that if you do your work during the semester, you don't have to take the final at the end. This is very similar to that. So yeah, I'm right there with you. And I don't think you can overlook the fact that these are the teams that you're playing. Like because of that stretch that Chance is talking about,
right? You
can't afford to muck this up. You've already lost to a not worthwhile opponent once this year, right? In the New York Jets. You don't want a repeat of that against a Titans or against the Jags in this stretch when the magic number is 4. So I'm with you on it.
Yeah, and the other thing is, like, you might be looking at the standings. Who knows? The Pittsburgh losing, that obviously helps. You want the Pittsburghs, the Buffaloes, I guess you can say Kansas City. I'm not even looking at that at this point. But you want those teams to lose. But there's a chance you're not playing for anything. And my dream scenario is actually, and this is me. I'm always like trying to think way ahead on this. I want them to not have anything to play for in week 18, basically have a de facto bye to get ready for the playoffs, and Tennessee win and ruin their draft stock. That's what I want. I want Amy Adams Stank in Tennessee wanting to beat the Texans. I want them to be sitting like at the number 2 overall pick and then just completely fall out of it because they win a meaningless ass game against the Texans.
See, I love that you have even localized the angle from the other team's lens. Like I can appreciate that. And I feel like a lot of people are, since we're so fixated on what the Texans got going on, trying to win the division, trying to get to the playoffs, it is easy to forget that the Titans are so bad that they are fighting for that number 2 overall, or for that number 1 overall pick. I think they might have, I don't know, they're close to it now, but they are among the teams that are in contention for that. How sweet would it be to be able to take care of business against them and also have them wet the bed there at the end? No, I mean that is the story that Texans fans probably are not talking enough about. Is, hey, do the Titans even want to win this game? You know, I haven't listened to enough Titans media like I normally kind of do during the week. I'll check in on the opponent's market. I haven't done as much of that this week,
dude.
But I am curious on how they feel up there about winning games at this point, knowing that they're headed nowhere, that they're better off losing games, kind of like how the Texans were a couple of years ago.
And it's funny that you say that, because I found myself doing that too. And I'm not really an X's and O's guys. I don't think you really are either. Although I've spent more time in the trenches this week than I usually do, because I think it's just a very, very, very tough matchup for this Texans interior O-line against the Titans interior D-line. I think that's kind of like a nightmare situation. But I have found myself like with the Titans and even the Cowboys last week, where it's like, man, I'm not even going to break this down. Like I might say that Micah Parsons can figure something out, but it's not like Tony Pollard and Calvin Ridley, if they can go. It's almost just like, look, there might be some struggles, but at the end of the day, as much as we bitch and complain and say that you aren't contenders, y'all should be able to win this game. And we really don't need to dive in too much. I'm wasting your time if we try to break this down too much. That's almost what it's felt like for a few weeks now. The Lions game was a little bit different, but even like the Jets, it was more of like a schedule loss. Like that's what I thought. This is like a schedule loss. This is just a bad matchup. And I guess the interior as well. But like this Titans game, it's not like I'm not sitting there breaking down Will Levis or anything like that. Like could they come to NRG and win? Yeah. Way stranger things have happened, but I'm not even like diving into what the Titans are doing outside of that D line, which I think Bobby Slowik said today when I asked him that it's the toughest that they'll face all year, and he had a lot of praise for it. And D'Amico feels the same way, but I'm not diving into this thing like X's and O's wise.
No, I think that the main reason for that is because we're far enough into the season to know what teams are. So if you're a good team, we pretty much feel like we got a good sense for it. And if you're a bad team, once you've played 10 or 11 games, whatever it's been, then we feel like we already know what the teams are. Then it's just a matter of identifying them and then saying how they match up against each other. And it doesn't take a brilliant X's and O's break. We don't have to go look at the all 22 of all 10 games to tell you what the Titans are good at and what the Titans are bad at. And then, of course, we follow the Texans on a day-to-day. We don't have to – I mean, there's not a lot to do there. We as far as scouting the opponent, it's pretty damn clear at this point once you get this far into the season, especially when a team is bad as the Titans are.
Yeah, and the Titans got a lot of problems, but I mean their interior. Like, am I overreacting to my fear of that? Because I just don't. And this is kind of your theory, and you brought this up. Brandon Scott with us. Shout out to B Scott for joining us. You threw out an interesting concept of how you feel about this game. You said you feel like the Texans could win the game and lose the fight. What does that mean?
Yeah, so I'm really worried about that aspect of it, the fight aspect of it. Like you and I aren't necessarily big on give me the prediction and the score type of thing. We'll do that because we're in this industry and in this business. But like, if I were to be nailed down and to try to give you a score prediction, who's going to win the game, I'm picking the Texans to win the game. Like, I'm not trying to get cute about it. I'm not really worried about them not winning the game, even though I am cognizant of or understanding of the reasons in which why they could lose, right? But when I say lose the fight, I'm talking about that exact battle in the trenches that you're talking about and the one that Bobby Slowik talked to in the press conference today, man. Like, to me, as bad as the Titans are and as aspirational as the Texans are, and I think the Texans are a good team, but they're probably more aspirational than they are great right now. Yeah. But even with the gap between the two teams, I still feel like one of the few things that the Titans do well, one of their few redeeming qualities that exist, period, just so happens to play into, in the wrong way for the Texans, into one of their weaknesses, right? One of the Titans' strengths, one of their main and only strengths, plays into one of the Texans' clear and obvious weaknesses, and that's the interior of their defensive line against the interior of the Texans' offensive line. And again, I could see this being the type of game. We can get into this, but I could see this being the type of game only similar to last week where the defense is what carries you to victory. Like the defense is ultimately what wins you the game because the offense on the other side is so damn terrible, and your defense is actually pretty good. And then you look at the offensive defensive matchup, on the other side. Okay, you're dealing with a pretty good defense, but your offense should be able to figure some things out. So I think that's where the game could get mucked up. I mean, I don't have to tell you about the Devondre Sweat, and nobody has to tell either one of us about that big son gun from Huntsville. And then, of course, Jeffrey Simmons is a known entity. So, like, you put those two dudes in the middle of a defensive line against an interior offensive line that has improved over the last couple of weeks, but has shown its vulnerabilities over the course of the season. yeah, that is a fight that you could expect to be a real tough one for the Texans and even be concerned about them losing. And why does it matter, Landry, real quick? Why does it matter? Because we're talking about not just the effectiveness of the passing game. Of course, they could wreck the game there, but also the protection of said quarterback CJ Stroud, right? Those two things combined worry me about not necessarily losing the game, but losing the fight.
Yeah, I mean, if you have bad corner play, then your corner gets burned, and it's like, well, your corner got burned. But if you have bad interior O-line and Jeffrey Simmons or Tavondre Sweat run free and they take out CJ Stroud, then that's much more costly than just a bad matchup. And let's just be serious. Like, it's not about Juice Scruggs, Jared Patterson, and Shaq Mason just stepping up and going toe to toe with those guys. That's not going to happen. Like, if you're going to put those guys in a dark alley, it's not going to go well for the Texans interior O-line. That's not even an insult. That's just how physical they are. So it's going to be on CJ to fill it out. It's going to be on Slowik to avoid it. And it's going to be on them to kind of like do what they can to minimize it, because if you're just saying, hey, there's going to be times where you're going to have to guard a man to man, but it's not, you're not going to block those guys consistently. It's just not going to happen. And that's probably the case for a lot of O-lines, but this is one of the worst interior O-lines in the league.
Yeah. And I think this is what, and not to be like, try to be film guy, but this is where you'll see them talk about, hey man, I hope that quick game is going right. Like things like getting the ball out quickly, making quick decisions, quick reads, and trying to scheme around what is a matchup disadvantage. And so that to me is actually the fun part about this game, Landry. Like if you want to try to get up for a team, aside from, and this is really where I'm at, aside from the whole emotional aspect of the Texans-Titans rivalry, man, I was on that last year, with the uniforms and some of the disrespect and some of the like outside the football part of it, man. I'm going into this like real business minded. Like, yeah,
get out,
man. To hell with the whole Oilers history. We used to be y'all and y'all used whatever that. Like, forget all of that. Like, don't muck this game up. Be cognizant of the fact that you could lose this fight, and even if you lose this fight, don't lose the guy. Like, I can survive them losing the fight as long as they don't lose the game. So that again, but to the point that you just made, is up to Bobby and the offensive line and CJ and them all working together to make sure that part of it doesn't happen, because what you said exactly is true, man. You put them in an alley and just say, hey, mano y mano, it's going to be a long night or a long afternoon, if you will, for the Texans. I'm glad they're playing on the afternoon finally again. But it's going to be a long afternoon for the Texans if that's what you're trying to do. So, but it is a concern, I think a valid concern, because it is the one place that you can point to without being super film guy, X's and O's guy, but just understanding who the teams are is the one place that you can look at and say, hey, this could be a huge problem for the Texans.
You ain't never hate.
Swarm.
Doyle says the Browns just proved division games can go either way. Don't take the Titans for fools. No, I agree with you. I mean, I think I'm not overlooking them one bit.
And the Browns didn't the Browns beat the Ravens earlier in the year too?
They did.
Yeah.
They did very much so. Coming up later on in this stream, here's a little tease for you. Brandon Scott says that CJ Stroud's the third most important Texan. Ooh. All right. We'll get to that in a sec. With B Scott, he's got a hell of a theory there. But the one thing I do want to touch on is this D line, and I think this D line is the only position group. And I don't think this is the norm around the league. Like, obviously, if you're at full strength, then you're going to be at your best. Like, that's a no shit Sherlock statement. But in more times than not, you're probably going to be dependent on being fully healthy to function at an extremely high level. The Texans D line is not that. Like, it does not matter. Like, the wide receiver core, if Nico Collins is out, there's a big dip. You can maybe say the linebackers too. You can put them in that example. But if Kamari Lassiter's out, the corners, there's a big dip. Even Jimmy Ward with safety, like you're kind of seeing that you kind of need Jimmy Ward out there. Big dip. the D-line, and this kind of speaks to D'Amico, and this also speaks to God. They did not settle for Tim Settle. That 2-year, $6 million deal looks like absolute gold with Tim Settle. But the D-line right now, like when it comes to what people were saying before the start of the season and what they're saying now, it's a strength. And there was like some disappointment that they didn't take anyone in the draft. The D-line has been incredibly insane. It's been the strength of this squad if you just go from top to bottom of the depth chart.
Yeah, man. And I've been watching out for this ever since we started covering training camp, man. I even remember asking Nick Caserio about this specifically right before, I guess, the first training camp practice that we were able to attend. And he slipped something in there about, this being the defensive line having a little bit more depth than they thought they did even coming in. And I was like, I don't know what you mean by that, because you got a bunch of dudes on here other than Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter, and of course Danico Autry. We know that they assigned, but eventually was going to be suspended. Like, other than that, man, I don't really know these guys like that. Like, I've heard of a couple of them, but like I don't know what depth you're talking about. And sure enough, as it plays itself out, that was exactly the case. Credit to them for like their scouting and their player evaluation. I think it's almost what they've done with the D-line as a whole is such an interesting but stark contrast to what they've done along the offensive line. It's like, what is it about D-line that y'all are able to scout and figure out so much better than you are offensive line?
Here's my thing. Here's my pushback on that, though, B. Scott. And this is I think this is like optimistic. You can look at this a number of ways, because I said this yesterday, but I actually think like the scouting of the offensive line goes to before D'Amico and Caserio were a pairing, because I think they thought, and their actions showed, that heading into this season, they thought they were kind of set at O-line. Now that was obviously like not the case, but they didn't proactively go into this offseason and say, we need to fix the offensive line. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't say that. They said, all right, these guys are going to be healthy. We're going to see what these guys are going to do. But they did say, we need to fix the secondary, which God they have. I mean, you have two of the best rookies in the league, and they fixed that, obviously. And they said we need to fix the D-line. And they traded Malik Collins for a bag of peanuts. And they did a lot of other things. They brought in Daniil Hunter, and they actually fixed the D-line. And they also said we want to add receiver depth. They made the trade for Stephon Diggs, and they kind of did that. So I think it's kind of encouraging. If it were just Nick Caserio and not Nick Caserio and D'Amico, then I think it would be an issue. But I think that the things that they actually proactively, the pairing of D'Amico and Caserio actually set out to do, I think they actually did a pretty good job. Now, you could say, well, that's defense. That's not offense. But I do think that it'll be interesting to see how they handle the O-line when they go into it like they did with the D-line in the secondary this offseason.
Yeah, I agree with that. I still think that you have to hold, and I know you're making the distinction between Caserio pre and post D'Amico.
Yeah.
For them specifically as a parent, I'm following you on that train of logic, on that train of thought. But just hear me out. What I'm saying is they still are held accountable for doubling down on the offensive line that they have now. Like it is mostly what they inherited, but it is also some of what, of course, Caserio drafted. What they planned for this year, and clearly the plan was not as a solid one as they thought. And I'll be honest, as even I thought. I thought it was going to be better than this. So like I'm criticizing something that of course I was okay with at the time. I want to be fair about that and acknowledge that part. But to the point that you're making about the D-line, though, I think it's a good one. I do want to point out that the one thing I would really disagree with you from earlier is how it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter if one or two guys is missing, but the one concerning part, and I guess the good news is that it looks like Will is going to play. Like, I was still iffy on that as recently as about 24 hours ago. I was still kind of like, I know he's out there, but is this going to be a pitch count situation? Is this going to be a game that they don't even really feel like they need him, and maybe they give him a little bit more rest? We know Will Anderson, so like if he can go,
you got to protect him from himself, brother.
You might have to like lock him out of the building or do something like drastic to keep him from playing.
But remember the last time he was on a pitch count at NRG against the Tennessee Titans? I think he played 12 snaps and had 2 sacks.
Yeah, no, he's a monster. He's a monster. So, yeah, I'll take really any version of Will Anderson, to be honest with you. He's my favorite player on the defense, possibly my favorite player on the team. But I will say, if it's going to be more than one guy that's gone or more than one guy that's dinged up, the strength of it is not just that it's top heavy. Obviously, it's got stars and Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter, but it's the depth of it.
Yeah,
it's the lack of drop off from guy to guy. But obviously, like if we want to just talk about attrition, or I mentioned math earlier, the more guys you lose, then now I'm gonna. So like if you're telling me Fadakasi's gonna be out, and Nico Autry could be out, and Will Anderson is on a pitch count. And you're just like, okay, all right. Now, I like the depth, I like the defensive line, but you're telling me too many different guys are either not playing or can't go full strength. So it is something to monitor. But again, going back to the earliest point of this episode of this show, like you playing against the Titans, man, you need to get out there and handle business, man. Like if the magic number is 4. Don't make it more complicated than it needs to be by losing to this squad.
Jim says that Pitre gets more love nationally than locally. I've noticed. I don't know where that's coming from. I haven't seen any national love from him, and quite frankly, I think he's getting. I think this role with Jalen Pitre. I know we've talked about it. I think it's phenomenal. And I was at practice today, and I just kind of noticed like. It's been the case for a while, but I was sitting there with Stutes, and by the way, SNL tomorrow 4:00, reacting to the final injury report. B Scott with us. You have your questions for Brandon? Get them in. We're 200 plus deep here, approaching 11 o'clock. I was looking over and like you know how they go in like position groups, like the linebackers go with the linebackers and stuff. Like you look over and the DBs are right in front of you. There's no Pitre. And the linebackers are right there. There's no Pitre. He's like right in the middle practicing by himself. Like he has his own position group. And that's the most impressive thing to me is that a guy who was obviously lost last year in that role, they've kind of changed that. And I asked Burke today, the defensive coordinator, like, is this just a Jalen Pitre position? And obviously a coach is going to say everything's based on personnel, but I think it is a Jalen Pitre position to where, and he even said, he used a good example. He didn't have to knock on wood. He goes, yeah, if his shoelace comes untied for a play, we're probably going to go more traditional and we're not going to play Jalen Pitre. But I think it's kind of interesting that amidst all this, like I'm to the point now, and I think Harris tries to come back sometime after the bye. They're gonna try to figure something out with him eventually. I don't know how he fits in. Like I guess he's just in the linebacker rotation, but they're not gonna go traditional 3 linebacker sets. Petry's like he's his own position right now.
Yeah, well, so
like there's no backup. Nobody's doing what he does. They're not gonna say Eric Murray go do what Jalen does.
No, I'll say this: the Jalen Pitre move is the most impressive coaching / personnel move that I feel like they've made on the defense this year. You know, it maybe you can argue
100%.
You could argue that, of course, Daniil Hunter is the more impactful because he's Daniil Hunter and he's going to make close to $50 million over the course of 2 years and all of that. And I get it. He's a double-digit sack guy. And Kamari Lassiter having another solid corner opposite Derek Stingley, you could make that argument. But to change Jalen Pitre from a struggling safety, a struggling deep safety, into like this thriving hybrid nickel / linebacker, whatever it is exactly that he is, it's really interesting and it's really impressive what they, first of all, the way Jalen Pitre has played. I want to give Jalen Pitre the credit first and foremost, but also since we talk about it, you know, on a little bit deeper level, to give credit to the organization, D'Amico Ryans, of course, everybody that's involved in making that decision and figuring out the best way to use Jalen Pitre, to be able to say, hey, man, we got a football player here. He doesn't necessarily fit the exact mold of the position that he plays, but he can play. And we got to just figure out a way to get him on the field and where to put him and what to do with him. And that they did it, man. I think you got to give them a lot of credit for that. and to the point of Jalen Pitre getting more credit nationally than he does locally, I think that's just a credit to local people actually having a better finger on the pulse and actually knowing how cool of a story this is. Like Jalen Pitre is a redemption story of sorts. And also, I think we got a better sense for what the weaknesses are, like exactly what the weaknesses are. But the fact that, and this is a credit to him, the fact that he's such a good football player that you want him out there anyway, and that you feel like he can do some stuff on the field that overcompensates or makes up for the things that he doesn't necessarily do well. You know what I mean? And it's, to me, it's pretty cool to be able to say my base defense is my nickel and my nickel is my base, and like it like we don't really have to deviate from that because our slot corner is actually kind of a linebacker and our linebacker is actually kind of a slot corner. Like to me, that's pretty damn cool. Like from a Jalen Pitre standpoint as a player, and from a coaching and personnel standpoint, as from the Texans organization.
Yeah, you're kind of setting yourself up. I mean, I think you're looking at one of the better secondaries in the league in the next couple of years. Like, I really do. Like, if you look at what they got going there, and who knows what else they'll do and how creative they'll get, but they've done a hell of a job with the secondary. Brandon Scott with us live in the locker room. I asked the question today at the press conference that everybody really needed to know. Bobby Slowik, very popular topic around here. I thought he called a hell of a game on Sunday. I'm not even gonna lie. I thought he called a hell of a game on Sunday.
Damn it, Bobby.
We didn't have to say.
Damn it, Bobby.
Didn't have to do it, but I thought he called a good game, and I actually thought that Nico and CJ connect, touchdown. Joe Mixon, touchdown. I thought he did all right. A lot of people upset about 3rd and 1, but I thought if we're just going game to game, I thought Bobby did okay. And if you noticed, he wasn't wearing a ball cap. And me and Bobby have had a ball cap back and forth going on for a long time. I think that sometimes the ball caps look a little crazy on him. And I might not be one to talk, but those team issued ones, I know I've gotten Mike McDaniel to make fun of him for it. I've gotten him to talk about it. And you saw what he looked like on the sidelines, B. Scott. You saw what he was looking like. There was no cap.
Yeah, hey man, I wish that sometimes I wish I just had more fun with this thing, because going in, I would have wanted to place bets on who got in the Bobby Slowik hat question, and you would have been at the top of the list. I think we would have had a number of candidates that could have got that question in, but I would have bet money on you being the one to get that question in come hella high water, and I guess I would have been correct. I would have won some money on it.
There were 3 contenders because he made fun of my hat earlier this year because I always make fun of his hats because my hat was dirty. It was fair. It was a fair criticism by Bobby, but it was either going to be me, it was going to be Cody, or it was going to be Alexander, because Alexander noticed it too. He actually got it in the mailbag with the Chronicle. He said he got the mailbag question. So
I saw that. Of course, as you know, I work over there, so I get a look at those these days, right? I get to look at those before the public does, and I probably shouldn't say this, but I also don't need to. I don't need to fight the paywall either to get a good look at the Jonathan Alexander mailbags and everything. So I was in on that early. I was like, okay, JA's gonna get in there and try to mix it up a little personality wise, not be so so stringent as as the beat reporter.
JA's doing some good work. He's finding his groove, man. He's getting more comfortable. He's in the mix right now. He's doing his thing. Here was the question that everyone needed to know from Bobby.
You knew this was going to come. How did it feel calling a game without a ball cap on? Is that superstitious? You might have to keep the streak going.
It's just one of those. It had change. Just had to try something different type of deal. I don't know. I mean, literally, I was there. I was like, I'm just going to do something a little different. So I wouldn't say it's not like I put a lot of thought into this. I mean, I was in the locker room and getting ready to head out for the game, and I'm just going no hat, and we'll see. I can't believe anybody noticed. My wife didn't even notice, so I didn't think it was a big deal.
It was a big topic.
Really?
Yeah, big topic.
Man, I got to actually get a haircut this time then. Dang.
Yeah. I love that. And look, I noticed it immediately, and not just Not just because I'm like, for content purposes, but honestly, man, I don't know. I think I could maybe count on. Okay, maybe. Man, I've seen Bobby Slowik without his cap on for sure less than 5 times in the year plus that I've been around him. It's just not even something that I've seen a lot. So maybe his wife definitely knows. She might not have said anything, and she might not have wanted it to,
Brother,
for him to be in his head.
He had some product in that hair. Like he's like, let's be serious. He didn't just go out there. My man had the comb over, like he knew he was playing the Cowboys on Monday night. Bobby was feeling sexy.
Let's get down to it, Landry. Let's get down to it. It was better. It was better.
Yeah, he had some product there.
Well, but let's just get down to it. The look was better. That was my take. For me, forget superstition. I think he's going to be whatever he is, whether he wears the hat or not. I'm not superstitious about is he going to call a good game or a bad game? How does he look? What does the swag look like? What best serves Bobby Slowik, hat or no hat? The verdict for me, what says you? I'll give you my opinion. He's better off without the hat. What you think?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, so far, so good. Back to the Super Doyle again. This is going to be a statement game from Bobby and CJ. I want to kind of get to that because I kind of want to touch on expectation versus elevation. And by that, I mean, with where the Texans are right now, and we're heading into week 12, they're 7-4. What do you think is going to elevate? Like what areas of this team do you think is going to elevate, and which ones do you just already have set in stone expectations? Because I think for me, I'll start it off. I think CJ is going to play better. I think especially with Nico Collins in the lineup, I think you can expect. And the crazy thing is, my other thing, I think that this defense that is already really good, I think this defense is going to get better. So I think CJ and the defense are going to elevate. I expect this offensive line to be what it is. It's CJ's going to have to overcome it. Slowik, I'm interested to hear if you think he's going to elevate, or maybe it's just kind of connected to CJ. But I think the two things that can win for you in the biggest moments, quarterback and defense, I actually think they elevate for the Texans.
Yeah. So I don't want to bail out of this, but I do feel like the balance of the offense is what's going to elevate. Like, think about this, and you might know this better than me, being as locked in as you've been. The amount of time that you've had Joe Mixon and Nico Collins together is just not a lot.
2.5 games.
2.5 games, right? And how many games have they played? 10?
11.
11. There we go. 11 games. So 2.5 out of 11 games. Like, the math on that is pretty obvious. Like, you just have not had your two best players on the field together for very long. So I think, and this is if you want to be superstitious or knock on wood or wherever, and hopefully I'm not jinxing this, but if you're going to have a healthy Nico Collins, right? You just got Nico Collins and Joe Mixon in this past game, the most recent game, I should say, but it was Nico Collins on a pitch count. Joe Mixon not on a pitch count, and he was amazing. Nico Collins on a pitch count, still amazing. Housed the touchdown that was only called back on a technicality that really didn't affect the play in any significant way. Like, you get these two guys together, it get the offense whole, and I'm meaning specifically like the three-headed monster of CJ and his two main and most important weapons in Nico Collins and Joe Mixon. To me, it's the overall offensive operation. When you first said that, I was going to say the passing game, but the more you talk, the more I actually thought about them all together. Just the offense as a whole, now that it is whole, and really that should help Bobby. I think that goes without saying. Hey, man, what kind of game can you call now that you've got, or once you have, a healthy Joe Mixon and Nico Collins, or vice versa, a healthy Nico Collins and Joe Mixon? Because he's had one or the other, but he's rarely had both. So I'm going to go just the offense as a whole. I know we focus a lot on CJ and the offensive line and the interior of the offensive line specifically, but overall as an offense, they're average. This is a mid offense.
They haven't been good at. I mean, they're not statistically good.
No, they're
scored their first touchdown in 5 weeks, and some will say, "Well, Nico's out." You shouldn't be that dependent on one guy. It's been an average offense.
Yeah, they are statistically mid. eye test, statistical test, all 22, whatever it is, this is a middling offense. It is a good team because it has an above average defense. And then on the offensive side, they do have some great players. And so they can rely on that, like on any given Sunday, to use a cliche, or at any given moment, to use another cliche. They've got the players that can make plays for you. But overall, production-wise, they've been a mid offense. And I think part of it is because of the fact, or I think you could, especially if you wanted to go with this theory, attribute it to not having your two best players together for more than 2.5 games. So now that they're going to have that, or if I'm going to, in this moment, take for granted that they could have that, then the offense itself should definitely elevate.
Jeffrey says Tank Dell has to play like a wide receiver 2 and Mechie needs to be a wide receiver 3. Well, I mean, I don't know if that makes you feel any better about the offense, quite frankly. I don't know. I think
are they not? I mean, they have at least recently, have they not played to that level? I would say the last couple of games, Tank has been kind of close to that, and Mechie looks fine. So, like,
yeah, he's all right. I mean,
I'm not sitting here like thinking, hey, I need more from Tank and Mechie. At least not coming off the last or the most recent performances. Anyway.
Yeah, Mech is playing the best ball he's played, but as far as a 3, I don't know about that. But we'll see. We'll see how it looks. It is interesting to say. You mentioned the 2 best players. What are you trying to say? Because you said Stroud was the 3rd most important player in the pre-show dialogue. You want to explain yourself there, my friend?
Yeah. So I didn't want to ruin the tease earlier. I don't want to seem like I'm backpedaling or anything, but I've thought this through, and here is what this take actually is. All right, you and I were on, I believe it was a KPRC program in about maybe 2 months ago, earlier on in the season with Randy McAvoy.
Yes.
We were on with Randy. We were on with our guy, Cody Stutes, and we were having a discussion about who the second most important player is. And it got me thinking recently how much you hate the whole whenever you're trying to have a conversation with somebody and they interrupt you with, well, you know what? That's not the conversation or what the conversation should be. Like, it's so condescending. It's so self-important and self-serving. So you somehow know the conversation better.
Yeah, lay down the rules for me.
Yeah, tell me what the conversation ought to be. But I do think that when you have a debate with somebody, you have to, and this is I think like a problem in society. I don't want to get too big picture here, but like when you have a debate with somebody, you should at the very least, and again, this is a problem. You should at the very least agree on what the debate actually is, and on what conversation you are having. And if y'all want to have a different conversation, you could do that. But I think so many people will have a debate or have a discussion and not realize that they're actually having 2 different discussions in one, and so they're talking around each other or talking over each other, and nothing is getting accomplished. So it did make me think about that. But really, man, as we've gotten through this thing, you and I were debating who is the second most important player on the Texans. Is it Joe Mixon or is it Nico Collins? You took Joe Mixon, I took Nico Collins. But that was predicated on CJ Stroud obviously being number 1. Right.
It wasn't even. It kind of canceled the debate. It kind of just.
Yeah. We weren't having that discussion. That wasn't the topic. And I think we agreed on that at the time. But the more I've thought about it and the more I've watched Joe Mixon play and the more I've watched them play without Nico Collins and how that's looked, the more I've thought about that debate and that discussion. And if we were even having the right one to begin with, to start with, yeah, we could talk about which one of those 2 guys, Nico Collins or Joe Mixon, is the second most. And then we're talking about this year, the second most important player on the team this year. We can have that debate. Yeah. But I think we need to start it with acknowledging that whoever we like the most, that person is actually number 1, and whoever loses in that discussion is number 2. That's who the second most important is. And I know CJ is number 3. And if you want to have a debate, about number 2, it's between CJ and whoever loses the debate between Joe and Nico. Whoever that guy is can be number 2 in a debate with CJ Stroud.
I would say like, and that's probably going to drive some people crazy, but I mean, like, if we're just like, there's a different way, because like, right. What we're saying about the Texans is about what they are right now. Like, when we say this offense isn't good, it's not saying that the offense can't be good. Like, there's certain things. So I agree with you. Like, if you're taking the 11 games and we're just judging the 11 games, I think you're right. But if we're talking about them reaching their ultimate goals and their ceiling, then obviously CJ's the guy for sure.
Yeah. So of course, I will admit part of me is trying to be cute here. Okay. Like CJ Stroud, and the reason why we didn't even consider if CJ was the most important is because A, he's a good football player. I think we both acknowledge that. And B, he plays the most important. Either one could be A or B, but he plays the most important position in sports, certainly in the game. So, okay, the most important player is the guy who plays the most important position and is good at it. Okay, I can acknowledge that. But here's the thing, though. Here's the reality of it with the Texans. Joe Mixon, okay, and here's where I'll also concede the argument to you, by the way. Remember, you were on the Joe Mixon side and I was on the Nico Collins side? Yeah. I've thought this through since you and I talked about it earlier and have decided that the debate, okay, here's me, Landry, deciding what the debate is. The debate is between Collins and Stroud at 2, because Joe Mixon is the most important player on the Texans this year. He is the one player out of the 3 of them and out of anybody on the team that just is not reliant on anybody else being good. Like he is the most individually excellent player on the team, period. CJ Stroud clearly needs Nico Collins to some degree, clearly needs Joe Mixon to some degree, or at least somebody like those dudes, like a player of that ilk, of that level, and it doesn't look the same without him. Nico Collins is a wide receiver. Obviously, he needs CJ or at least somebody like him, right? You know, a good quarterback to make him effective. But Joe Mixon, anybody can hand the ball off to him that just has handed the ball off to a running back before. And he clearly does not need the offensive line to be at its best for him to be at his best. He is the most individually least dependent star on the team right now. And I would say that's super important. And he provides an element that I think is going to be real critical for them deep into the season if they're going to realize their dreams and get past where they were the last time. Like, you know what I'm saying? If they're going to get past the quarter round or actually make it to an AFC championship game, they are absolutely going to need a player like Joe Mixon or a running back of that ilk, and they finally got one.
Doyle back on the soup.
You ain't never hate.
The second most important player on the team is Joe Mixon. Yeah, and I mean, that's just where we're at right now. I also think there's like another element of what Joe Mixon brings to this team that I think it's been soothing for CJ. And I think CJ's, there's a lot of leniency on Joe Mixon. And the craziest thing about Joe Mixon for me is, like, he's such a hardo, like, and he's like a natural hardo. He's confident. He's got like a healthy amount of cockiness, but like he was humbled to be a captain. Like, it wasn't like, it's not like it was, it almost seemed like when he became a captain, like he's taking it upon himself to kind of try to lead these youngsters, because I think I think it's good to have a guy like Joe Mixon that hasn't reached what you're trying to reach. And I think sometimes, like, there's guys that have won Super Bowls that elevate young teams up. Like, I guess Charles Haley with the Cowboys, like, he left San Francisco and he went to the Cowboys and he'd been there and stuff. But it's almost like Joe Mixon. I think there's 2 elements to someone like Joe Mixon that I think that I think are valuable. Number one, he has tasted defeat in the Super Bowl. He's tasted defeat in the AFC Championship. And I think he's trying to get where they want to get, but he's also been where they haven't been, if that makes sense. And the other thing is, I think he has a little bit of the Sidney Dean factor in him, where I'm not sitting here acting like he wouldn't have ran like this no matter what, but I think he's kind of pissed off with the way things went in Cincinnati. And I think there is a whole nother element and a whole nother level to Joe Mixon right now. And I feel like that's a contagious energy that D'Amico Ryans has felt. Say what you want. That Cowboys game, you can say, like, well, yeah, there were Texans fans and you could kind of feel it. As soon as he pissed on them and basically disrespected them on that second touchdown and started high stepping and doing that, that's where you were just kind of like, all right, this they're ready to go. They're ready to go.
Yeah, man. Mixon, in addition to being just a really good football player, has got an edge to him. I feel like we talked about this before, but he's got an edge to him, and there is an element to his personality that I would like for the entire team to adopt. Like, and not to say that they haven't, but like that is what you want all of your football players to represent and to kind of be about. Like, he's got like this confidence, borderline cockiness, but like you mentioned, there was this humility in being named a captain. Like, he seems like he could be kind of like on the edge, but also like a legitimately good teammate at the same time, like on the edge in the exact right way with the exact right tone
100%.
that you want. So I think that that's super valuable. I do want to get back to this though with this Stroud thing, because
we know CJ's the most important thing. We're talking about what's happened lately, like up to this point.
I'm talking specifically.
If you had an MVP vote, like if you were voting for MVP, like if Lamar Jackson wins MVP based on what happened over a certain period of time, that doesn't mean he's better than Patrick Mahomes.
Right.
But if we're sitting there and we're filling out our ballot right now, like me and B Scott, and we have to think about, based on these 11 games, who the MVP of the Texans would be, I think it would be Joe Mixon, or it could be Nico Collins if you factor in the absence too. That's what we're saying. Obviously, CJ Stroud is the most important thing. So don't sit there and say, B Scott, Landry Locker said CJ Stroud. No. He's the most important. He's going to take you there. But if we were filling out our MVP, Joe Mixon gets my vote.
CJ Stroud is the most important reason of why you're here in this position, for us to even be having these kind of conversations about the Texans. And he's 100% the most important part of their future. Like, he is the most valuable and most important piece to the franchise, period. Like, named anybody, player, coach, executive, or otherwise, he is the most important player. But isolated for these 11 games, like, think about it, Landry. 11 games, right? They've played 11 games. They've won 7 of them, correct?
Yeah.
If you were to go through each of their 7 wins, okay, if you were to go win for win, game for game, on the games that they've won this season, either Joe Mixon or Nico Collins, in at least 6 of them, and arguably in all 7 games, either Joe Mixon or Nico Collins was the best player on the field.
Was the player of the game,
was the best player, and that's every game that they've won this year. And I'm not saying that they win them even if Davis Mills is the quarterback and CJ Stroud is not, and that he's not valuable. And that's not what I'm saying. Yeah. But what I'm saying is, every game that they've won this year, the best player on the field has either been Nico Collins or Joe Mixon. And the further along that we've gotten in the season, and of course, Nico missed that handful of games that he missed, it's been a lot of Joe Mixon. All right. And that's not necessarily a knock on CJ as much as it is a credit to both Joe Mixon and Nico Collins when he's out there and when he's healthy. And we know what CJ is about. But we know what CJ can do.
But the other thing about it is, if you want to win at the highest level, this has to be this discussion you're having. Like, and I've talked about this, like, not being CJ dependent. Like, you don't want to be CJ dependent. Like Patrick Mahomes, if you look at the stats and you look at how he's played, and even some of the biggest games that Kansas City's won, he hasn't been like the best player, and they're still able to win games. So there's a big difference. Like, you don't want to be in position where you're the Indianapolis Colts in the Andrew Luck era, and you're just like depending on him to do everything. And if he doesn't play his best, you're not winning games. I know there's been like a tough stretch, but that's the difference between building an organization and being 100% dependent on someone. So this is kind of the discussion that you want to have if you're looking at a team that can actually win when it matters most. And I think that's the good thing about this discussion that is being had, and really the reality that we've seen the first 11 games of the season.
Yeah, I think that's actually a real good way. I hadn't thought about it in that way, but yeah, it is a good problem to have to be able to even say is, that you could have players in contention with CJ Stroud for being the most valuable player on the team, not being overly reliant on CJ, as you mentioned. And you got to have dudes like this, right? Like, you got to have dudes like this to be in the position that all the Texans fans that we hear from want to be in, that want better, that want to demand better. I do like this comment here that Derek
Swarm. All right, Doyle back at it. He says the third best player on the team is Derek Stingley.
Hey, let's have a conversation. I mean, I disagree.
Like if we're just filling out our Texans MVP ballot right now, like, and if you have to go 1 to 4,
he's on. Hey, look, he's somewhere on the list. He is somewhere on the list, man. Like I think it's good that they got enough good players now that we can have legitimate conversations, not just conversations for the sake of having them, but real legitimate conversations on who's the best, second best, third best, ranked
Are your
top 5.
Are your kids sports fans?
Yeah, but not in the way that we are, right? They like shorts, YouTube. They like highlights. It's hard
I'm just saying, like, if you had to buy your kid like a jersey, he'd have to at least think about what he wanted.
Oh yeah. My kid is my son is my girls aren't sports fans at all.
Yeah,
but my son is a Nico Collins guy.
Yeah, but he has to think about it. Remember 2 years ago when we were talking about, man, whose jersey you buying?
Yeah.
Like what's going on? You at least have to think about it. Random nothingness. Shout out to you on the soup. Win the next 3 after that. Nothing else matters, but getting healthy for the players. F that gauntlet. Yeah, I'm with you. Like I would say just blow off the gauntlet. That's my thing. Like win the next 2. If the Colts find a way to lose to Drake May and the Patriots and the Lions,
right,
then you win. The division's over for the bye. So yeah, just make that less important. Like my idea is when you're playing on Netflix on Wednesday, you're resting up. Like you have the division wrapped up by then. Like that is my ideal scenario. Like you don't have to force guys to play on a short week. Let Beyonce do what she's got to do, and you don't have to force it. That's where I'm at. So I'm with random nothingness there. Get it over with.
Yeah, there is part of me that wants to see them, because there still is, I think, a open conversation, debate, discussion, whatever, on like how they play against the good teams. Because there hasn't been a whole lot of that. Like obviously they got the win against Buffalo. Yeah. So that's
Buffalo was banged up, man. Buffalo was banged up.
And Josh Allen played the worst game that we've ever seen him play.
Yep.
All right. But it is still a feather in the cap. But to the point though, that you saying that is to the point. Like Buffalo was banged up. I would like to see them look like a championship caliber team against another championship caliber team. But that might just be me being greedy. And I don't know if you get everything that you want, right? So, like, what do you want more? Do you want to see them look like a championship caliber team against another one? Or do you want to see them whole and healthy when it comes time to actually do the championship things?
Maybe you can go both. Maybe you can go both. Just eliminate having to have the pressure of it. I thought this was an interesting quote today. And I think this is kind of it's been one of the when you talk about elite things, like the most consistently elite thing for the Texans the last few years has been special teams. It's been near the top 3, I think, of Goose Gosselin's special teams rankings, which is like a nerd heaven. And Frank Ross has been a big part of that. Special teams actually didn't get off to too great of a start this year, despite Kaimi Fairbairn. There were a couple of games that there were mistakes that could have cost you games. The block punt against the Colts, inside the 5, the Steven Sims muff. Tommy Townsend was at punting as well, but the special teams have kind of jumped up to the standard that Frank Ross has set. And I thought this was an interesting little thing from Frank Ross today, talking about the fake punt attempt by the Dallas Cowboys. Here was what Frank Ross said about that. And this is just a whole nother element when we talk about all 3 phases, complementary football. Here's Frank Ross, and this kind of gives you an idea of who is overseeing that third phase.
The tape going into it, they had it up versus Philly, and you see it, and you see Brian Anger.
Go ahead, Frank.
Get a signal from the personal protector, and you see Anger lift his hat, and then it gets.
All right, so he's basically saying that they checked the they showed that they were thinking about doing the fake punt in the Philly game. So he sought that out. I think that's impressive right there by Frank Ross, to say the least.
Man, so Frank Ross is like, think about the fact that he has, how many regimes has he survived now? Like that, that tells you really all you need to know. But yeah, man, like Frank Ross is one of the most detail-oriented, most dedicated and passionate people at their craft on that team, period. You know, like if you want to talk about people that are like just dyed in the wool and in the trenches, to use another term, like that is Frank Ross, man. And I love that he's able to give you those little telltales. You know what I mean? Like those are things that I could watch all 22 that you could throw at me and probably would not catch that.
Yeah, and they didn't even do it. Like he just said, yeah, they jerked their heads up, and you could tell that they were thinking about it, and then they went out. So he basically called them out for telegraphing it. So that's
but it does not surprise me that Frank Ross is more prepared and better at his job than the folks over there with the Cowboys. That doesn't surprise me at all.
It's not. That special teams coach Fossil is kind of a bit too. I wanted to ask you this about the Steelers game before we get out of here. Do you think snow games are cool? Like I know, like all over the timeline, you're seeing people talking about, oh, this is football and all this. Are you a fan of these snow games?
I think it looks cool on TV, but am I a fan of it? No. Do I think it's actually cool? No. Do I envy the players that are out there? Do I think that they think it's cool? I think they're weird if they think it's cool. Do I want to be out there covering what? Like, I don't admire anything about it except literally the visual on TV. I'm talking about from the comfort of where I'm sitting at right now, looking at my TV. When I saw it earlier. All right, I think my daughter knows, somebody in the house noticed, oh, it's snowing. I said, oh, that looks cool.
Yeah.
Is it actually cool? Hell no.
Man.
No.
They got to get rid. You got to have I've said this, you cannot build a stadium unless there's an indoor option. And Buffalo's going to build one without, and I'm like, what is this? Like, they should lose the franchise for that. We've come too far in society for this to be a thing still. It's one thing in college where there's not going to be retractable roofs and stuff, but this is out of control. Like I feel so bad for like the people that have to work. I feel bad for the players. I feel bad. Like these fans are just going out there, just getting pissed drunk and throwing snowballs and stuff. Like this is unnecessary, to be honest with you. I am not a snow fan at all, like not even a little bit.
Yeah. Now we are both Southerners saying that, right? Like we are native.
I hate cold weather. It drops below 50. I'm upset.
And we're true to that. Like native Texans who do, neither one of us likes cold weather. And so there's a bias a little bit in our feeling about that. And of course, the people that are out there typically are people who are more accustomed to being out there in the snow. So it's just different strokes for different folks. But I don't know how they can make the argument that is somehow good for the product. Like, again, literally the only cool thing about it is the way it looks. It does look cool on TV, but that is it. Does good football not look good on TV? Like, does it not look good when it's sunny out there, or when you can't tell what the weather is because there's a roof on the stadium? Like, it still looks just as cool to me then. So real football weather, you can keep it. You can please give me fake football weather if that's the case. Give me fake football weather every game, please.
Darkman 420 says that's real football weather. Mr. 713, it's grown man football. Should be able to play in any condition. Okay, Al Bundy. Like, come on, man. Like, it's a hard watch. Get it together. There's a reason they're not doing that in the Super Bowl. Doyle again. Goodness gracious, Doyle. Appreciate you, my friend. You don't understand cold weather games because you live in the South. That's a fact.
Thank God.
And I understand it. There's not much. I mean, it's not like a rocket science thing. I understand it. I just do not enjoy the cold at all. I just, especially with how the game is right now, but I get it. Killa X God says, because y'all skinny, I bet me and Cody would love the cold. Perhaps. I don't know if Stoots would like it or not.
Yeah.
I don't know if he
Stoots, no matter what size, still Southern, still from down here, man. I don't think he'd love it. I don't think I don't think anybody really actually loves it. Maybe there's something in you, either ego or bravado or just presentation. You feel like you gotta say you love it, but they don't love that, man. Like if you love that, there's something a little off.
You ain't down with that. Let's be serious. We're not into that. All right, so we got the game. Has the uniform stuff kind of died down? Are we over that? Are we done?
We've been through that. Like we've been through that already. And then also, like as far as uniforms go, like this is more so the year about the Texans' new unis. You know, like I got a hard time caring about the uniforms from the 1990s, 80s, and 70s when the Texans just came out with these new threads, man. Like if we go talk about fashion, I mean, and we've been doing throwback jersey. How long, Landry? How long we been wearing throwback jerseys? 20 years, 25 years now? Like
more than that, because I remember even like Chameleonaire in the color change and click. No, I think it was in Mixtape Messiah, which was what was that, like 04, 03?
Yeah, so we're talking 20 years.
Well, at the time, he even said, "Don't wear throwbacks because the trend is getting tacky." So, that's early. That's 22, 21 years ago. He's saying that the trend's getting tacky. So before then, it was even kind of a thing.
Yeah. So I'm on the new threads, man. I'm way more into what the Texans are doing with their uniforms and far less into the fact that the Titans want to hold on to the Oilers uniforms, which is, you know, and again, I thought it was just more so disrespectful that they wanted to wear them against Houston last year. They're entitled to them, and I get all the reasons why. I just thought it was a direct, middle finger to do it the way they did it.
The stanky one, Amy Adams stank. And there's been some people saying that, man, I wish the Texans were wearing the H-Town blue uniforms in this game. And I talked to someone who has like a lot of opinions about the Titans. She said that they wouldn't waste those on the Titans because they're not a big enough threat. So I'm just saying, like, that's what she said. And she's kind of got like a lot of opinions about the Titans, but she said they wouldn't waste those nice uniforms on such a mid opponent. That's what she told me last year.
I can appreciate the person that you were talking to for saying that. I also think that is kind of more of a one-sided streak. Like Houston cares much more about them wearing blue than, say, Tennessee cares about. I know they were trying to get, stop them from wearing it and all that kind of stuff, but I don't think it hits the same. No. We're gonna take the blue back now and wear the blue. I don't think that quite hits the same as them wearing the actual Oilers uniform. So yeah, they're not the threat, but then also I think on the other side it doesn't. The insult does not exactly hit the same either. So this one is more about the magical number and that you are running. Your magical number's 4, and you're running one race to 4, and then whatever their magical number is to try to get the number 1 overall pick, or whatever their aspirations have to be now after going all in on this season. They spent and operated like a team in the offseason as if they thought they were going to be competitive. Every one of the rest of us that was watching was like, I don't know, the Titans, I don't get what they think they got going on here. We were right. They were wrong, and now they're on a completely different trajectory. That's what this season is about. The teams being in opposite directions.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting ball game, but that magic number, if the Texans take care of business and then the Lions win, it goes down to 2, which is crazy. To think about. You haven't even gotten to the bye. That bye ended up being perfectly placed. Some people are like, it's late. That is perfectly placed.
Yeah.
It's kind of set up. So it's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to going out there. I know you're looking forward to going out there. Do wonder also if there's kind of like a little bit of a mental letdown where it's easy to get up for these primetime games, and then you're going out there, it's going to be half empty. You got dog-butted squad across. I do wonder if that's another factor too. So we'll see what it looks like. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah, man. It will, like, not to be hard, old man, but if you're gonna be a championship level team, like, you got to be self motivated. I think they would tell you that, man. Like,
No,
they
for
can't.
sure.
It can't be the crowd. It can't be the opponent. It can't be a narrative.
No doubt.
It's got to be about you. And forgive me if this sounds a little cheesy, man, but it's got to be about you. It's got to be about you at this point. We're at that point in the season, man. It's all about you. Control your destiny. So it's about you. It's not about them.
You and destiny. Look at this guy. This guy's getting like freaking Al Pacino in Any Given Sunday. B says RJ swears that the Titans finna do something against us. You're talking about from the Titans Coliseum. I'm actually going on with them tomorrow at 7. So it's going to be the usual handicap match. Those country mofos. Shout out to them. Shout out to Morocco T and RJ and my man in Oklahoma. So I don't know what they're going to say, but they're definitely going to probably take some shots at CJ, and we'll see what the hell they got to say.
They're supposed to put on that is the heel they are supposed to be.
They don't make me mad. I think they're cool. I like that they got the twang too. They got kind of like the Memphis twang vibe. All three of them. I like them. They like to. I don't get in like the back and forth like Oilers versus Titans type of stuff. It's not really my lane. I'm right here on YouTube. I'm at the game. Every once in a while I'll mix it up on Twitter a little bit, but not about stuff like that. Get mad at what you want to get mad at. I'm cool with you. B Scott, I appreciate you, man. Game day. I'll see you up there on Sunday. I'm assuming you'll be doing the Lord's work. So I appreciate you. I enjoy getting to talk to you about these types of things, and it's going to be a fun weekend, no matter what. It's gonna be a fun stretch if we're being honest with each other, regardless of whether you think they need to be healthy or not. It's gonna be a fun stretch, my friend.
Yeah, man, a fun stretch, a fun time being on. Always good to get in here and interact with the community. Know y'all in it together. I'm in it with y'all, man. So appreciate you for having me, man.
All right. Appreciate y'all for coming through. It's the Locker Room. SNL tomorrow, 4 o'clock, not 9 o'clock. Always remember, as B. Scott just said,
we the source, we the pulse of the city too. Landlocked, got the game in the headlock. Localized every time, can't stop, won't stop. Yeah, we top 2 and we not 2. Plugged in daily.